In today's video, I'm going to show you how to make these really cute bridal shower cards that absolutely anyone can make. If you do not have a die cut machine, don't worry. I have a free template for you to download, and you can make this with a pair of scissors, and it's as easy as it can be. If you do have an electronic die cutting machine and you want the SVG file, all those details are below in the description box. Now, on my website called cal9designs.com, you can download this particular document. It is in PDF format, and the lines are really simple, so you just need to trace along them and cut them on out of the colored cardstock that you want, and then just piece them all together like I'm about to show you. I also recommend that if you wanted to keep this design, the easiest thing to do would to print that out on paper and then laminate it and then cut around so that you have a template that you can trace around much easier. Now I have a die cutting machine, so I cut all my pieces out. The reason I did not put a score mark where you see me putting my fingers here in the actual design in the SVG file is because sometimes when you have a cut line, sometimes those cuts in the paper make it look like so it's uneven, so I just left those out. But if you're good at freehanding and putting a score mark here without a pencil mark like I'm doing, then go for it. You don't need the pencil line if you don't want to put it in there. For me, visually, it's easier for me to draw those 2 points together with a pencil. Then I will score, and then I will fold them back and erase the pencil line.
Now, to make this a little easier for myself, I'm going to take those pencil lines that you see on that scoring area, and I'm going to line up the pencil marks with a line on the scoreboard, and then I'm just going to connect the two ends together to create that score line. You could also put 2 tick marks, one at each end of the corners, and line those up with the groove in the scoreboard and do it that way as well too. And on the second panel of the corset piece, like I'm showing you here, I put a tick mark at the top of this one and at the bottom. So I just met those little areas with the grooves in my scoreboard and then scored. So I have less pencil marks to erase. So you can do that as well, just like I'm demonstrating here. You can also put those pencil tick marks on the back of these 2 pieces. That way you don't have to erase anything, because when you fold it over and we punch holes and put the eyelets, you won't see that anyway. Now, the reason I'm making these flaps and folding them over and scoring right here is because when you put eyelets in there and you punch, that really kind of compromises the integrity of the paper, makes it a little bit more rigid, and you could deform the paper by messing up some of the fibers. So that's why I put that flap. But if you don't intend to use any eyelets in your design, you can actually just cut this flap that I'm folding over and leave it out altogether. So for those of you who do want to install eyelets on these 2 pieces, I left the flap there so that when you fold it over, it gives a lot more stability to the paper and makes it lay nicely. Okay, so here are the metal eyelets that I used for this card design, and I had to find ones that were small enough. And to be honest, this came in a huge bag. All of the colors were a mismatch. So one night while I was watching TV, I just sorted them all out and put them in this container by color family so that I would have an easier time pulling out the ones that I wanted. Okay, so do you see this pink cardstock on pink? It's really hard to see, and so I thought it would be easier if I created a little black pen mark in the center of that hole so that when I use my Crop-A-Dile that you see there on the right, when I use that to punch out the holes, I can see them a little bit easier. So you can totally skip this step if you have better eyes than I do. Okay, so the Crop-A-Dile is an eyelet hole puncher as well as an eyelet installer. And I've had this in my stash for a long time, so I'm just pointing out that I'm actually going to be using the smallest hole punch and lining that up with my holes here. So again, the black pen mark is going to allow me to see right through the cardstock and make sure that I get the hole punch centered. So this Crop-A-Dile makes really easy hole punching of this card piece here that I'm showing, but it's also not necessary. So if you want to skip the whole eyelet thing altogether, you can just take a really large sewing needle and punch your holes in that way. Again, you could cut off the flap that's folded here and just use a large sewing needle to make your holes, and you can thread it up that way as well too. So you don't have to have this tool, but I did link it in the description box below if you're interested in checking it out. Again, so I'm going to mention this because I really think this is easy for people to keep as a template, but I just highly recommend that you download the document, laminate it, and then cut out the pieces for this. So that way you have an easier time tracing it and punching holes through these pieces that I'm doing right here. You can just use it with a pencil mark, and that way you know exactly where to punch your holes and then use it that way. So this card is much quicker to make if you don't do the whole eyelet process, but I just thought that was a really fun finishing touch. So I wanted to do that on these cards. For those of you who have never seen a crocodile in action, I'm going to actually show you one eyelet. So I'm going to just show that one to you, and then I won't bore you with having me install the rest of the eyelets, because while it goes pretty quickly, it's, kind of the same repeating process over and over again. So who needs to watch that, right? So you basically just install the long point of the eyelet right in here into the hole so it sits in there. And then you're going to take the crocodile and you're going to match up the pins so that they are identical in color. So you probably can't see it here, but it's gold. And it shows you how to install the eyelet and how to press it down. So I'm going to install that into that eyelet, press with the tool, and then if you look at the front, it looks really nice and finished, and so does the back. Okay, so off screen, I installed all of the white eyelets. There are 7 on each side, and so they're all nice and finished. And then I'm going to start the threading process of the ribbon. So the ribbon that you see up at the top of the screen called Celebrated is one that I purchased at Michael's. I was looking for flat ribbon that didn't have any ribbing in it like this one does. This one made it really challenging. Although it's the correct width of 1/8 inch, it really made it challenging to thread this all the way up. So in essence, you're going to want to start at the bottom of both of these pieces here and just thread it like you would a normal pair of tennis shoes or shoelaces, so to speak. And the reason why this made it difficult is because the ribbings in that ribbon made it really difficult to thread through, and it was a little bit too bulky. So if you get the flat satin ribbon, you're going to be in a better shape. So in the next 2 examples that I show you, I ran out and got some ribbon that doesn't have any of the ribbing in it, so to speak. I hope that makes sense. Now what I'm trying to show here is, and this did not work because the ribbing in that ribbon made it difficult to thread through, but if you have the flat satin ribbon, you could take a really large-eyed sewing needle and use that to thread the lace all the way up. That would make it a lot easier. But in essence, I did one side first and came out through the front, and then I went through the other side and did that the second time, lacing up the other direction. So lace it however you're most comfortable, and it will look great in the end. I highly recommend that you leave a little bit of space and wiggle room between the 2 pieces, so don't make it super tight, otherwise it's going to be hard to adhere down to the base part of the corset card. So just make it really loose, and then you can cinch it up at the end once it's adhered to the corset base. Now, for those of you who might ask what the length of the ribbon was that I cut for this piece of the corset that I'm threading up, I didn't really measure, but maybe do like, I don't know, 3 times the amount that you think you'll need, because this ribbon is really inexpensive, I should say. And you're going to just start threading up one side like I did here, and then go back around the other side and thread all the way up the other side. Now here's a great example of the close-up of that type of ribbon to avoid. Don't get the ribbon that I'm showing here in this one. You're going to want to get the stuff that's extremely flat and much easier to work with. Okay, so now I just showed you that I'm threading through, and do you see how there's a little bit of a gap in between there? That's what we want. So you definitely don't want to make this really tight, because we're going to have some flexibility once we adhere this onto the corset base. So if you find yourself without enough ribbon to create a little tiny bow at the top, don't worry about that. You can actually just create a little knot and then create a bow and on its own, and then just hot glue it onto this portion of the corset. Okay, so now my bow is finished, and if you notice, the bottom and the top don't really match up with the corset pieces, but I'm not worried about that because we're going to fix that once we adhere it to the corset base, which is that solid piece. And the reason I wanted you to leave a little bit of wiggle room with the ribbon is because it's going to be a lot easier to get it to match up and see a little bit of a gap in between, so you can see the ribbon underneath, and it makes it really, really cool. So you can't really tell on this bodice portion, but I did leave enough wiggle room to tie up those laces and make them a little bit tighter once I have it adhered to the card base of the corset base, which is what you see on the screen here. So off screen, I put some double-sided adhesive foam tape. And of course, I'm not putting it in the middle of those laces. You don't want to put it there, otherwise you'll see the tape. So just avoid those. And I would recommend that you put one panel side down at a time. So the tape is off of that one side and I'm leaving that on the other, because with the laces, you're going to be able to stretch it a little bit and pull it a little tighter once you adhere it to the other side. Okay, so now that side is adhered, and you can see it offers a lot of dimension, which is what we're going for here. And now I can just fold this piece over and release and take off all of this release paper and adhere the other side and pull it a little bit so that it lines up with the edge of the corset base, and you'll see what I mean here. So I'm going to pull off that last piece there, and you'll see I'm going to actually pull it and then line it up with the other side. And there you go. So now you'll see that little bit of a gap in between. But like I said, if you don't want to see that gap, I did, you can leave that out and have the lace be as tight as you want it. So this was a little bit of an afterthought. I thought it would be really nice to have the cups of the corset, so to speak, and add more dimension that way. And I thought this would be really cute. So you'll see me go through this step where I actually line up and try to get the angles of this whole circle cut so that it lines up with the corset base. You don't even need to worry about that, because what I did was I did the design and I revised the template that you're going to download, and it already has this piece in there. So I'm just showing you how I did this step and came up with this portion of the template. But don't worry about this. This is all going to be in the file that you download, and their pieces are already there for you. So all you need to do is trace them and cut them out. Okay, so now I have these two pieces, and I'm actually going to attach them using foam tape as well to give it even more dimension, which you'll see at the end really makes a big difference and making it look sort of realistic. So to adhere those, you want to line them up with the center and the top of the bodice, just like I'm showing here. And oh my gosh, it's super cute. I hope you love it as much as I do. So again, I put on foam tape, and once I pull off the release paper of the foam tape, again, I'm just going to line it up with the center portion of the bodice and then also the top, because that curve is also matching the line of the bodice. So there we go, one piece there. And look at how much cuter that is with these pieces of the cups. My husband couldn't believe I was doing this, and I said, trust me, the women will love it. It's absolutely adorable. This would make a really fun card for anybody. And also, all of the pieces in the design are super easy to cut out. I wanted to make this accessible for anyone who does not have a die cutting machine. But again, SVG stuff is all linked in the description box below for those of you who have an electronic die cutting machine. So here we go, it's all finished. Isn't that cute? Now you can embellish this however you want. So I did a couple off screen to show you as well too, but on this one, I decided to use some rhinestones at the top to kind of bling it out, so to speak. And then I added this all-to-new. It's called Just Leaves, and I'm sorry I don't have a link for that. I don't know if they still have that. But these are the flat back rhinestones that I purchased off of Amazon. They're pretty inexpensive and I needed to use them up. But this is the ribbon I told you you shouldn't use. I don't like this. I wasn't a fan of it because of the ribbing in the ribbon itself, but this is 1/8 inch. And like I said, if you purchase white 1/8 inch ribbon, you can dye the ribbon any color you want. So here's another example. I used a really pretty embossing folder by Altenew. I put my label on the back of my cards because I don't enjoy the stamping portion of that for the cards that I send out. And on this one, I used these Spellbinders cutting dies called Be Bold Blooms. And I thought those were really cute little accents. And then I put some heart-shaped rhinestones on those. Now this one might be my favorite. I had an embossing folder on the back. And then I also used the Be Bold Blooms die set on this one as well too, with my label on the back. And I wound up coloring those leaves, and I used that tip from Jennifer McGuire to color the leaves to kind of give it a little bit more interest so it wouldn't be so flat looking. But this is the ribbon I recommend. I purchased this at Walmart, and you can see it's 1/8 inch, but if you look at the ribbon itself, it's all flat, so it's way easier to work with, and this is the one I recommend that you use. And if you just have thread in your stash, you can do that too. So anyway, I hope this is inspirational to you guys. I hope you'll give this a try. If you do, please tag me on social media. I'd love to see what you create with this design. Here's a look at the rest of the cards that I made all together. And I hope you have a great crafty day, and I will see you soon. Ciao for now.